Hey, have you ever met a wine snob? I've met a couple wine snobs. They're like people that... I don't drink alcohol, by the way. I've been drunk a few times in college. A wine snob, one of those people that's like tasted thousands of different wines. And, of course, art like wine tasting, I'm only assuming since I'm not a drinker, is a rather subjective. But you are objective. I mean, there's reasons why some wines, command, it's like it's a really good year. There's like 100 different wine tasters, and they all agree this is just awesome, and they jack the price way the hell up. Same thing with lenses. I mean, you have to have a spectrum of experience that... I own hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lenses, literally, many hundreds of lenses, many hundreds, tested thousands, and actually calling a lens perfect, and of course there's no such thing as a perfect lens, just there's no such thing as a perfect, beautiful woman. I mean, there's, some, like Cindy Crawford, for example, it's like, well, she's got a mole on her face. Look at that big mole on her face. Like, yeah, but... And also, every year she gets older, she looks a year younger. You know what I'm talking about? She looks like younger now than she did 20 years ago. Maybe she made a deal with the devil. Same thing is true of lenses. They've all got a wart on their butt somewhere. They'll say, how can you say this lens is perfect? I can say it's perfect because I own many, many, many hundreds and tested far, far, far more than that. They have to fall in with criteria. Sometimes autofocus counts, but I actually don't take that into consideration. Autofocus speed is important since lenses, and autofocus lenses obviously, have different types of drives. You got screw drives, micro motors, silent wave drives, linear motors, stepper motors. There's essentially 7 different types of autofocus drives. People talk about a camera having really fast autofocus, and people that say that are stupid because they don't realize that the fastest autofocusing camera in the world is still slow as piss if you stick a slow type of autofocusing system that's within the lens itself onto that really fast autofocusing camera. So I really don't take that into consideration. Micro contrast, ultimate rendition, autofocus elements, just the je ne sais quoi, the ineffable bokeh, saturation, micro contrast, resolution takes a play in there, obviously. So there's like a dozen, I'm sure I'll leave like a couple off, but like my picks for some of the best lenses in no particular order made would be like the 50mm f2 Yashinon, 58mm 1.4 Voigtlander Nocturne, 40mm new lens is absolutely incredible, 40mm 1.2 Voigtlander Nocturne, 35mm f2 Distagon, 135mm f2 APO sonar, that's a Zeiss lens, the 55mm f1.2 a Nikkor, 300mm 2.8, or which version? Optically, all of them are near identical and they're near perfect. So it's like, well, how could that lens be perfect? It is huge and very, very heavy. Who cares? It's still a perfect lens. 300mm 2.8 Nikkor. The 45mm, the best one, actually the very best, you want to get really, crotch to the wall, would be the AFS Nikkor, which is the heaviest one, by the way. The 45mm f2.8 GFX Fujifilm lens, the 110mm f2 GFX Fujifilm lens, X-series lenses, the 16mm 1.4 Fuji, the 80mm 2.8 macro, which is right here, by the way, the 55mm f1.4 Auto Rekinen. It's rare to find, you notice that all of these are primes except for a couple, and basically no wide angles. But 2 wide angles that qualify as perfect in my book really do. Like, these are lenses I could just leave permanently glued to my camera and I'd be pretty much happy. 24mm 1.8G Nikkor, 20mm 1.8G Nikkor, 105mm f2 DC Nikkor, 180mm 2.8 D-series autofocus Nikkor, 135mm f2 DC Nikkor, 17 to 55. This is a DX lens. That lens is incredible, it's awesome, it's inexpensive, it's made extremely well, made in Japan. 17 to 55, 2.8 Nikkor. Well, that's a DX lens. So what? That lens is incredible. The 60mm f2.8 Nikkor, that's a macro lens, it's also a portrait lens, it's the perfect all-around Swiss Army knife lens, it's also a reproduction lens. The lens is incredible. There's 3 or 4 lenses I've left off of here, but I mean, that's basically like 85% of them. Someone's going to say, what about so-and-so lens? You know, you forgot about that one. Someone always says that. Is this subjective? It is, but it's far less subjective than you might think. I mean, it's kind of like someone, and I'm only using this analogously, like someone's been, you know, slurping wines, you know, the most expensive wines. Like, so you get a bunch of people on the internet, it's like, it is my favorite lens in the world. Like, yeah, how many lenses have you tried? Oh, you know, like 15, but this one's really good. So in the spectrum of thousands of lenses, you've tried out 15, and you're sure this piece of crap you're recommending everybody buy is really good? Yeah! I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, no. No. Doesn't work that way. You know, you're being honest, but your honesty is still ignorance. If someone wants a really awesome camera, like a lot of people, like, here's an example, like the new 105, a lot of people think the best lens is the most expensive, with the biggest aperture, T-stop, and the one I complained about endlessly, that new 105 millimeter f1.4 Nikkor. Really expensive lens, but forgetting that, it's plastic, it's made in China. The output is really funkadelic. I mean, it looks horrible. The images are flat. They say, well, it's really shallow, bokeh. It's really fast. People mount that on their cameras, like, look at this lens. The front element is like that. It's like, yeah, that's some expensive glass with like 1 billion elements in it. When you open it wide open, bam! Everybody looks like a cardboard cutout. Talk about two-dimensional image rendering. Poor color saturation, really poor. Everybody that buys this lens, they go into Lightroom and they go over to the saturation slider and they go, wham! I gotta drag it all the way to the right. It's like, yeah! What pissed me off when I was talking about this lens is Nikon had some of their shills, their Nikon, one person in particular, who got really mad at me, but he had no basis for his BS. Is they had a Nikon ambassador take a bunch of pictures with this lens. Like, this guy's a good photographer. This is wonderful. But when you zoomed into his images, he drew in eyebrow hairs. The depth of field was so shallow, it looked horrible. Because like when someone took a picture at f1.4 at like 10 feet, 12 feet basically, like this part of the nose would be in focus, but not this part. It's like the depth of field was like this. Like if you focused it on someone's eye, it's like this section would be in focus, not this section. This section was way the hell out of focus. It made you look, it made you stare at the images like you're having a stroke or something because it looks so unnatural and the images were so undersaturated. He posted some images of the straight out of camera images and they looked horrible. Washed out like somebody bleached the piss out of them. It's like, well, that's straight out of camera. That's what that lens does. But then he'd post some where the saturation slider was like, wham! Drug it all the way to the right, then he added a ton of sharpening because at f1.4 that lens sucks. He's like, well, it's really dreamy. It's like the depth of field's really shallow. It's like, yeah, depth of field's not only shallow, it's too shallow. It looks horrible. And this Nikon ambassador, I mean, you just look at the images, the out of camera, it's like, there's something wrong with this. Well, you got to make these images look good. So he heavily tweaked it, which is fine. It's anybody's prerogative to tweak the hell out of the image. But when you buy that lens, you ain't buying someone else's photoshopping capabilities. It's like, that lens don't make images like that, girlfriend. It makes bleached out images in an f1.4 at 13 feet. The depth of field is razor thin. It just is aesthetically unpleasurable to look at. It's like sticking your crotch in a meat grinder. It's like, that lens don't do that. You know, this guy processed the hell out of these images, which is fine. That's his prerogative. You know? That is basically that person's, when he edit the hell out of those shots in Photoshop, he himself is saying, I'm a Nikon ambassador, but these images look crap. So I need to saturate the hell out of them, drag the sharpening slider, and paint in some sharp eyebrow hairs because the depth of field is just heinously shallow. It's like, well, that's wonderful, but that means that this lens don't make very good images. Yeah, I know everything I just said the past 5 minutes was grammatically incorrect in English. I know that fact. Thank you so very much. I was making a point. So, That's the stuff I present to people. It's like, yeah, this guy's an eye candy ambassador. He's being paid to make the images look good. A lot of people are just impressed by fast glass. They're like, oh my God, I gotta have this lens. Like, why do you gotta have it? Because the front element's as big as my head. You know, big fast lenses is better. Yeah, bokeh. It's like, you crazy. You're a bokeh slut. Bokeh slut. Bokeh slut. It's like, that doesn't make a lens good. If it's what you want, then it's valid. That's what I want. I want blurry images where the depth of field is only like 5 micrometers. Oh, good. You got it. The images are aesthetically unpleasing. When you go to sell it to people, like, this image is fuzzy. It's like, no, it's actually sharp. If you look at it between here and here, this eyelash is sharp, this eyelash is sharp, but the other eyelashes before and after it are not sharp. People are like, this image is out of focus. It's like, no, it's not. It's just really shallow depth of field. Try selling that to your clients. Yeah, the image is blurry. I don't care what you say. It's too blurry. You know, there's a difference between bokeh. He's like, yay, the background's out of focus, and like, bokeh! The difference is that one looks pleasing, and the other one, when you look at the images, it's like you're having a stroke. You're looking at the image and you're squinting one eye. I've seen people do that. You think you're having a stroke looking at the images. It's because they suck. They're aesthetically hyper unnatural. Hyper unnatural. There we go. Peace out, Girl Scout. If you like these videos, please click the link below. Tell me to jump off a cliff, whatever makes you happy. Peace.